Welcome. So you have come into a NetSquared event where, this event is being broadcast out of Vancouver, Canada, but obviously we've got people visiting us from lots of different interesting cities today, as I can see in the chat window. Did I start the recording? I did. I'm glad I reminded myself. And that recording will be helpful because if you need to leave early, say you arrive late, or you need to review the presentation later, that will be available to you in the next day. We'll make that video available. So hi, I'm Eli, your NetSquared organizer. And NetSquared is this program of TechSoup. NetSquared is a global network of Tech for Good meetups. So there are actually about 120 of these groups scattered across the world, which seems ridiculous, but I've got a map to prove it. And this organization that we all are part of, TechSoup, is a nonprofit that helps other nonprofits like you get, implement, and use technology effectively. See, I promised you a map. All those little dots means there is a group. In fact, you can see we've got David here from Pascack Valley. We've got the Calgary organizers in place. We've got a couple representatives here for the network. So, like every community, we have rules and we have values. So I think the first is that we welcome everyone. And the second is that we put community first because we're really here to support each other. The thing that brings us all together is we're here to build stronger nonprofits. So technology is the lens, the tool that we use, but ultimately we're here for the sector. We also invite participation. Now, yes, I did mute you by default just to keep things from getting out of control today, but the chat is open and I'll be monitoring that through the course of the presentation. So please throw your questions in there. And then finally, we have an open chat, which means you need to remember that we treat each other with kindness and respect. So if you got a hot take to put into that chat window, just take a second and say, is that the right thing and the right time for me to be sharing? And if it is, awesome, go for it. So we totally need you. We help keep this community going with guest experts like Joel, with people who are monitoring the chats, with people doing note-taking. So if you want to get involved with this group, maybe you've got a super great idea that we should be talking about, talk to me and I can help you make it an easy process. We also, of course, have sponsors. So the first I want to talk about is TechSoup, which is the parent organization, and they connect nonprofits with donated and discounted products. You've seen some of these logos. We're using Zoom. There's Box.com, there's Amazon, there's DocuSign, there's Microsoft, there's Google. If you're thinking about spending some money on software, start with TechSoup first because we can save you probably up to 80% in many cases. And your TechSoup account is free, so why not? Just to give you a sense of what those savings could look like, I put together a model of, say, a little nonprofit with 10 staffers. And so what we're seeing here is the retail and then the discounted pricing through the partnership these companies have with TechSoup. And as you can see, those discounts start getting pretty huge pretty fast. And that's just the one-year version of that. For those software where you need to get a new version, well, we're saving you all over again. And of course, there's also the forums at TechSoup. So if you have any other questions that we're not able to answer today, hop over to those forums because it's full of other nonprofits, consultants, and other tech experts. Other sponsors include our friends at IETS Payments. If we were together in person today, they'd be buying the first round of drinks because they love you. They're the people you would go to because they are managing online financial payments. So basically, if you want to take money in through a credit card or ACH transfer, IETS Payments is a company that will help you as a nonprofit do that. They only work with nonprofits. They're based in Vancouver, which is nice because if something ever goes wrong, not that it ever would, you know where you can go to gently poke people in the ribs. We're also sponsored by a One Day website who keeps our website up and happy and healthy. And N10 would be covering the cost of snacks, again, if we were in person. They have a great conference, which sadly was canceled, but we'll be back together again. I'm holding out hope. It's going to happen. And you, of course, could be a sponsor. It'd be a lot of fun. Basically, if you want to access close to 4,000 nonprofits who are technically curious, we're the best way to reach that audience. So definitely reach out to me and we can work magic together. So today's guest is but one, a singular guest. And so we've got Joel Harrison here who's going to be talking about how nonprofits can create 10 times the content without more work. And that sounded like too good to be true, but I'm going to take him up on that. He's up to that challenge. So Joel is the founder of ElevateHub.ca, which is the place for BC impact news and job listings. He's also a social impact podcaster and marketing consultant for nonprofits and social enterprises. He also writes real good. So if you're ever looking for someone to make you sound like you're much better than you are, Joel will do that magic for you. Joel's in fact a member of the core Net2Van team, and you probably best know him because he was the writer behind all of last year's digital nonprofit conference emails. So give it up for Joel, member of our community, upstanding man. And the way you can do that is in Zoom, there's like this little sort of reaction emoji play. So yeah, throw that reaction right in there. Thank you. And with that, it's over to Joel.
Awesome. Thank you, Eli, so much for inviting me here. Oh, there's the claps. Nice. I'm thrilled to be talking about content and marketing with all of you. Thank you for joining and spending some time with us. I also wish there were snacks. I should have prepared something. Maybe next time we should figure out how to email snacks or something like that to everyone. We got to figure out the technology. Let me get my presentation online here. All right, can we see? Perfect. So yeah, so Eli mentioned my name's Joel Harrison. I have a marketing company called Methodic Content. You'll see the name there. And what we do is we create content strategy and plans, training, and actually create content for social enterprises and nonprofits. In addition to that, I also recently launched a media site, ElevateHub.ca, where we talk about all of the social impact news for BC, as well as events and job listings on there as well. So yeah, today we're going to be talking about how to create 10 times the content without more work. As Eli mentioned, I do like to use words and sometimes I exaggerate. So without any more work might be a little bit of a stretch. I apologize for the clickbait, but these are going to be some of the most efficient ways to create content. Some of them actually without more work. Some of them do require a little bit more work, but we'll get into that. So sort of. If you do want to contact me or connect with me online or anything like that, my email is here, as well as my Instagram and Twitter handle if you'd like to connect there. So this happens to me. It happens to most people who are tasked with creating some kind of content. You sit down and you're faced with that blank screen. It's staring you in the face, looks something like this. It's daunting, and it's just not inviting. You don't want to do it, and creating content just gets really hard. Some people hit that writer's block kind of side of things, and so what do? You probably end up pushing it off to later. You look at your calendar, and oh yeah, you work in a nonprofit, so this is what your calendar looks like. You've got too many hats on, you're doing too many different things, and creating content just kind of often gets pushed to the side. So that's why today we're talking about 10 most efficient ways to create content, and in some cases without any more work, and in some cases with minimal amounts of extra work. So we're going to blitz through a ton of different ideas today, different concepts. This will be a very kind of high level touch on a lot of different methods, but we're not going to necessarily go into extreme detail on any of those. If you'd like to have more conversations later about them, I'm happy to do that, but this is going to be a bit more of a high level list of methods we can take to create more content. Now, first, we got to set a little bit of groundwork. Some content is promotional content, and we need to distinguish between this and another type of content, because promotional content is something that is directed towards a service, a program, or a call to action of something your organization does. So this is your standard kind of, ask to donate type of content. You've all done this before, but this type of content is something that is not inherently valuable on its own. It directs people towards something else that is valuable. That is something that we just need to distinguish between impactful content, because this type of content, you can't just create a ton more of it, because asking people to donate over and over and over and over again is not giving them value. So instead, what we want to talk about is impactful content. And I'm a firm believer that marketing on itself should be impactful and can be. And by that, I mean that if the organization were to create marketing that did the same thing as the organization does in terms of towards the same mission, that marketing can stand alone as an impactful piece, as an impactful activity, as opposed to just an activity that drives people towards a product or service or program. There's just a quick example here of this organization that's providing a valuable piece of content to their audience. This is a 21-day kind of email-driven course where they're giving a little bit of information to this new subscriber each day about ending violence and starting with yourself in that case. So this is a type of content that is impactful on its own, regardless of what the organization does. This stands alone as something that has impact. And that's the type of marketing where people can see it and connect with it and get value from it and build a relationship with you. And so you can keep providing more and more content like this, where it creates value. And inside of that, you can deliver some of those promotional types of content. But this is the type of content that we're talking about today, creating more of, because people want that type of value. So ask yourself, if my nonprofit didn't exist, would this content still work to advance the same mission? And it's just a nice little litmus test you can ask yourself about the content on whether it follows that impactful type of content model. So we're going to go through 10 methods. The first one here, find content you didn't know you already created. This one is, I love this one because it sometimes catches people off guard in terms of what have we done before that we can actually just use as content. And the first one here is emails. So we've all answered emails, we've sent tons of emails, and I'm talking about direct emails. These are emails to other colleagues, emails to other organizations, emails to corporate partners or program associates. These types of emails where you're answering some type of question or giving some sort of information about your industry sector, your programs, your insights into how recipients feel about your programs. There's so much in these emails that you can actually pull out and use that as a piece for your content, whether it's an article or a video or something on social media. So there's also phone calls, similar to the email type of situation, a little bit harder to go back and see like, hey, what did we say in those phone calls? But sometimes you say things over and over again, common phone call lines that you're talking to, whether it's prospective donors or partners or something like that, new partners, you're talking about very similar things often. And so if you find these common phrases or things that keep coming up, that's often fuel for articles or other content that you can be creating. And it's something you're already doing. You already know that it's there. Annual reports, this is a little bit more of an obvious one because people are generally creating these annual reports with the idea that it's content to be shared. But I want you to think about it in a little bit of a different way. Instead of just sharing the entire report, what you can do is actually piece it out as well. You can take small snippets of it and use that on social media. Maybe you have some data in there that you're using. Maybe you have some information about your industry or new updates or testimonials, things like that. You can actually pull those out and use that as content that you've already created. And then training manuals, if you're an organization that's organized enough to have training manuals. I know that's not always possible in some smaller organizations and larger ones. You know, there's a lot of training material in there where you're talking to new employees about the industry, about the recipients, about the programs. And if it's written down and it's in there, you can probably pull it out and throw some of that into articles. You have to work on it a bit, but the whole idea of this is to get the core piece of your content from something you've already created before. And then speeches or talks as well. Sometimes you'll have, you know, Google slide deck or something like that one of your executives or you know, fundraisers has used in the past a couple of years ago. And sometimes that has, not only does it have information in it, data and things that you can use, but it has graphics as well, hopefully. So if your organization has any of these assets that you've already used, one thing you can do is just kind of go through them and take stock of all those assets that you could possibly use for content later in the future. So these are some of the different areas that you can look into. And I don't know if Eli mentioned before, but feel free to ask questions as we go. I enjoy being interrupted. So if you've got things you want to ask, things you want to say as we get along, please type them into the chat. Okay. So now on to method number 2. Start with core content. So this one is a fairly, I guess, advanced approach to creating content. But if you look at some of the organizations that are creating the most amount of content, for-profit, nonprofit, on any side, anyone that's creating large volumes of content is usually starting with some kind of core piece of content. And what they're doing is what they call repurposing. And so you keep one core piece of content in mind, but you also understand that it can be pieced out into so many different other types of content, other formats, and other versions of that same piece of content. And so what you end up doing is creating one piece of content and then reformatting and reworking to create essentially 15, 20, 30 other different pieces of content. And what we can look at here is a common example for organizations that are leveraging video quite heavily is if you're creating some kind of long form video, it does need to be, you know, a significant piece of content. If it's a 1-minute video, there isn't a whole lot of meat there to be able to piece out and repurpose into other areas. But if it is a long form piece of content where you have, you know, a couple of different sections to it, you can actually cut those into different segments after you've created that. So maybe this is a video of it, could be an interview, it could be a conversation with a partner or another staff member where you're talking about different ideas. You can piece that one video out into 3, 4, 5 different videos that are all, you know, a couple of minutes long each. So now you have an opportunity to share not only the first video, but all of those other pieces onto social media as well. And so you can put those onto the relevant channels that work for you. Now, what else you can do with that video is you can take pictures during that recording. So this gets us into the realm of more that behind the scenes kind of content where you're giving people that inside look to what your organization is working on and doing. I've done this in the past with podcast interviews, things like that, where I've created a long form piece of content and I actually took pictures of the creation of that content. And especially if it's something that's valuable that you want to tease into the future to say, this is coming, I'm going to publish this, those pictures can be quite valuable. And then you can take that video and you can literally transcribe it, just take the audio out of it. There's a program that I use called otter.io, and it can take video and audio files and do an automated transcription from it. And they're getting quite accurate nowadays, so this is a pretty efficient way to turn your videos or audio into text. You do often have to reword rework some of the text a little bit in order to publish it onto any sort of platform, your website, but they're getting quite efficient. So with a transcript, now you have a lot of fuel to write a summary blog post about that same video, where you want to pull out some of those major ideas and maybe frame it in a different way than was in the video or in that transcript. But now you have a blog post that's based on relatively the same type of information and content. And then you can copy quotes. So now you have a transcript from that video. Let's take out 5, 6 quotes from that video and turn them, the text right into your emails. Maybe it's into a newsletter, put them into tweets. That text is very useful in several ways. And then you can also turn those into quote images as well. So images with quotes over top of them could be used on Instagram, Facebook, within your email newsletters. There's lots of different ways to use those as well. And then you can also pull the audio out of that video and turn it into a podcast. So the core ideas and elements of the video, unless it's a very visual type of video where you're walking somebody through a scenario, or you have some type of slides or something, data that you're describing, then you'll be able to pull that audio out and turn it into a podcast. And my chat window, there it is. And then you can actually just share that email or share that video through email as well. So from this, you can see kind of a map of how one long form video could be cut up and pieced out and reformatted into, and depending on how many segments you have, how many quotes you can pull from it, 15, 20, 30 different pieces of content that you can use throughout the month, throughout 2 months, to fill out your social media channels, to fill out your email campaigns, to post things on your website, on your blog, and all of that. I do want to note that while this example shows video as the core, you can also start with an audio podcast, or you can start with an article. Now, the way that you divide it and piece it out into different types of content will vary, but it's the same type of theory where if you're going to start with a podcast, you can transcribe it, you can turn it into blog posts, you can take quotes from it, all of that can go into emails and social media posts. And if it's an article, you can actually turn that into quotes as well, quote images, sharing it in different ways, or you could do the reverse and take your article and record that as a video. So now you have a new format with the same content, essentially. So this is what we call repurposing, creating one piece of content and using it multiple times. So for your task on this one is I would recommend deciding what type of core content you could create or you are already creating that could be repurposed into different pieces. Some organizations don't have the ability or the staff or time to create video, but maybe that core piece of content could be an article or something a little bit easier to tackle from the start. All right. So method number 3 is compile content. So this is actually the reverse of repurposing content, or the last example where we're dividing one core piece of content. So with compiling content, this is usually a little bit easier for nonprofits because they're creating more short form or micro content on social media. And with that, you can combine, let's say, several social media posts of yours and turn that into an article. Obviously, you want to put some thought into which social media posts you're combining and make sure they're all at some kind of relevant theme, and you can combine them in a way that makes sense to be one article. And maybe it could be a summary post of the images that are in there. Maybe it could be a sequence of events throughout some sort of campaign that you're running, and turning that into an article or some longer form piece of content. You can also gather up quotes, facts, data you've used elsewhere, and use that as fuel for an article where you're summarizing an issue and sharing 10 facts about a certain situation, where maybe in social media you've used those data points and those facts all separately. You can go back and actually just combine them all, and now you have basically the content for an article. So that's a great way to reuse a lot of your social media content. And then take a few educational articles, for example. You might be able to look at similar topics if you are an organization that's been creating blog posts around similar-ish topics. There might be sections in there that you can piece out from 3, 4, 5 different articles and actually turn that into another article on its own as well. And then these ones are interesting as well when you go back to your social media posts or some of the content that you've created years ago. It's interesting to see the progression of whether it's your organization progression of maybe it's the size of your organization, or maybe it's the number of recipients or donors, or it's data that's relevant in your industry, and comparing what it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago to what it is now. And then that could be great fuel for article content, longer form pieces. So recommendation here is to write down the micro content you could compile together into something bigger. So might take a little bit of effort to go through your previous social media posts, your previous articles, and look at it with this lens. But if you can get some new longer form pieces of content, some substantial variations on what you've created in the past, and then you're well on your way to creating more content. Method number 4. So we got partner with organizations here. Now there's so many different ways to partner with different organizations, so we're not going to go into all of them. But what we do want to look at is some of the easy ones where potentially being interviewed or having your message or info shared on someone else's channel can be a really easy way to create content, because you're not formatting, you're not advertising, you're not editing what you're putting out there. But if you have an executive director or someone in the leadership team who has an inclination to be the face of the organization and talk about what they're doing, you can find other podcasts, other blogs, other it's great if you want to be on news stations, if you can get to that, but sometimes the high profile news stations aren't always accessible to everyone. So you can actually go out and look for other podcasts. Everyone's always looking for new people to interview and new content to create for their podcasts or their blogs, and reaching out to them and offering information, making sure that you're trying to bring genuine value to what they're doing. Is a great way to not only create content in the process, because they're the one doing the recording, the podcast, the editing, all of that, but you're leveraging their audience as well at the same time. So you're not only creating content, but you're expanding your reach if you're featured on other people's content. And then just using those corporate partners or those other organizations to leverage their relationship with you by creating quotes from, or asking them for quotes and creating images with it, using your quotes or images to feature into their content on either social media, their emails. If you're genuinely appreciating that relationship, genuinely showing that company or that organizational partner in a positive light, they will love it, they will help share it, and they will might do the same for you in sharing, in creating content that features your organization as well. So your task here, I would suggest researching some podcasts or events or really mission aligned organizations that are already creating content, and trying to see like, hey, could we add value to the content that they're creating, and then reaching out to their marketing teams or their content producers. Okay, so method number 5, capturing ideas together. When you're looking at creating more content, usually more content means you need to have more ideas of content. And being that sole person who's sitting down at a blank screen thinking about ideas is not easy, especially in smaller organizations, and you're so busy and distracted by many things. Capturing ideas can be really, really important, and capturing them together. So Creating a lot means capturing a lot, and having a shared place where people can offload their ideas, photos, videos, means that you aren't wasting as much time going out and searching for things. And what I mean by that is trying to build, it could be as simple as a Google Drive folder where everyone in the organization has access to it, and you give them the ability and the instruction to take photos, take notes, take insights from the activities that's going on in their work stream. Maybe it's a physical event, maybe it's work, maybe a work meeting, maybe it's a meeting with corporate partners. There's a lot of different opportunities where there's so many people in your organization that have an opportunity to capture content from other sources. And so building that place where people can have a place to put their photos, their videos, and their ideas is really valuable. So that way, when you're coming down to that content planning time, okay, what am I going to write? What am I going to put on social media? You already have lists of photos, videos, ideas to use as fuel. So it helps eliminate some of that procrastination. I noticed somebody was talking about that beforehand. The procrastination of sitting down at that blank screen, I've definitely faced it in the past. And knowing that you have somewhere to start helps eliminate a lot of that procrastination. And if you can do it in a place where other people's ideas are put into that capturing spot, that folder, it helps you out significantly. And then all you have to do is start filtering and reorganizing and figuring out what to use first. Obviously, providing instructions to keep it organized is going to be super helpful here when you're dealing with other people in the organization. I'm often frustrated with how people are naming files and folders. It's like one of those big pet peeves of mine, but it makes things so much easier to find and makes your workflow so much faster when you have structures for your file names and folders. So this is like a tip that I had to put in here just because it annoys me so much. But starting with the date helps to filter, and so you can see when something was captured, and then the event name, and then the person's name of who captured it. This could be a folder or it could be a file name, but having the date, the name of the event, and the name of the person who captured it can be really valuable, as opposed to just jumping into a folder and it just says img5432.jpg, and there's like 100 of them, and you have no idea where to start. So try to keep things organized. It speeds up workflows. And then also for capturing ideas or links to other articles, having a spreadsheet that everyone can go to is really valuable to be able to filter, sort, Control F. You can find things in a spreadsheet really easily. And whatever you can do, avoid bookmarking. I think I probably talked about it later, but bookmarking links from URLs, I find it really difficult to translate those links into something that's shareable to use with other people, filterable, you can check things off. If you have it in a spreadsheet, so much easier to see what articles you've found, you've used, you've shared, you've deleted, and who found it. So I would encourage everyone to create that folder and a short set of instructions you can share with your team members to drop their pictures and content ideas into. And this will help you create a significantly more amount of content. So method 6 is guest content. I don't know where we're at for time. Let me see. 5:40.
You got a solid 10 to 15 minutes.
Okay. So guest content is a pretty wide-ranging topic, but the idea is that try not to create content yourself if you can avoid it. There's a lot of different sources where you can get other people to contribute content. So other team members is obviously a really great place to start. If you can get them to document the process, just like we were talking about, taking photos and videos, or talk about their experience in some kind of their own point of view, whether it's an article or a video, those can be really valuable pieces of content. But also asking your volunteers, your donors, your participants in your programs, just asking helps to not only reaffirm their involvement in the organization, appreciate them, but it can also be a really unique perspective to be able to share with your audience when it's not coming from the marketing department, when it's not coming from the organization, and you have that, that genuine other person's view of some program or something that you're doing. And then students and new grads, I've done this before as well with other organizations. Depending on your industry, you could look at particular people that are studying certain topics that are related to what your nonprofit does. But you could also just look at English majors, marketing majors, people that are interested in creating content or writing, and reaching out potentially on LinkedIn or through your other networks, because there's so many people that are looking to not only build their portfolio of work, but just to get experience, to build their network, to have something to put on their resume. And offering the opportunity for someone to contribute an article or contribute some piece of content for your organization is a really great way to engage other people in your organization, as well as create content. Having an outline for articles or photos that you'd like to use is really important. So if you're going to be asking other people for content, you need to have pretty clear instructions on what an article would look like if they were to do it. How long is it supposed to be?
Can I ask Joel something?
Yeah, for sure.
Sure. So as an engineer, I'm tickled that your comment, look for English majors or something related. So what happens when you let the IT people write the blog?
When the IT people write the content?
Yes.
Yeah, so well, you're going to be faced with people who are not good writers to write content. It's going to happen, and there is the
some
potential.
of them have English degrees.
Well, that's fair. And if they have a valuable point of view, like a unique point of view, there's no reason that they can't be writing articles for your organization too. They see what you do from a different lens. They could talk about the culture. They can talk about team members. They can talk about leadership within the organization. So there's a lot of valuable insights from pretty much every different angle. But on that point about somebody who's not exactly a writer, you can potentially turn that writing offer or that writing opportunity into something where you might have to get a little bit more involved and do a little bit of an interview and kind of reformat and work their content to make it a little bit more engaging or interesting. But yeah, I think everyone in the organization has potential to have a unique voice, a unique perspective on a variety of different topics or situations or experiences that your organization has.
Mm-hmm.
So your task here, I would encourage everyone to describe and outline what type of article you'd be looking for, and then basically just start asking. Start with your other team members, start with your volunteers or donors. I know everyone's busy, but if you were to put out an article every week as a single person in a department, that's a lot of writing, that's a lot of work to do, it's a lot of planning. But if you can ask 2, 3, 4, 5 other people to be creating content, now you have your own content that you've been creating plus outside content, and it really helps fill out that content schedule. Let's skip through some of these to get a little faster here. Method 7 is flip the angles. So if we're struggling for variety, struggling for different ideas, because sometimes we get stuck taking the same pictures, taking the same type of article that we're writing, and that slows us down because we get less inspired. I would encourage everyone to start physically flipping the angles. So if you're taking photos, literally start just taking photos looking up, taking photos looking down, look sideways, flip the angle of what you're doing. And if you're doing some kind of event, you can actually find 3, 4, 5 different unique angles and use those as 3, 4, and 5 different posts on social media. Just because you have one event doesn't mean it has to be one post on social media. You can use multiple angles to create that uniqueness and that variety. So just as an example, we've got a forest here, we've got a standard shot on the left, kind of looking at those trees, but then you can shoot that angle directly up and it looks vastly different. And then you can actually, you know, take a closer look at one tree, or you could zoom in right onto one leaf. And you can do this with events. You can do this with, you know, products or things that you're offering, office layouts. Zoom in super close on someone's pizza sitting on the table, zoom out super far to show the whole team. Look at those different angles that you can show your organization in. And then point of view as well. If you're looking at different angles of view, who's the perspective coming from? Can you get a note or something from your executive director? Can you get a quote from one of your donors or volunteers? We're looking at whose perspective, which we were just talking about. The IT department has a certain perspective on what your organization does. And that can help you create a variety of content, even if it's about the same topic, because they're different points of view. And then topic framing as well. So if you have an article, there's generally an opposite view you can take to that article. And it, not opposite as in you have to disagree with what you just wrote, but opposite in terms of how you frame it. So here's a couple of examples. If you had an article titled "The Emotional Toll of the Climate Crisis," now you can retitle it and call it "Avoid the Emotional Toll of the Climate Crisis." It's a slight tweak, and you could probably use about half of the content from the first article into the second one, rework it and add a little bit. Similarly with this one, anxious about the climate crisis, use that emotion for action. If this was an article, you could actually reframe that. And what would you tell your friend who is anxious about the climate crisis? So it's relatively the same content, but it's a different framing, it's a different wording, it's a different perspective, and it's a different, I guess, audience who might read it. Sorry. So my advice here, find a good piece of content you've done in the past, a social media post, picture, and try to flip the angle. See if there's a different version that you can do of a very similar type of topic or event. Okay, and then curating content, again, back to this idea of if you don't have to do it yourself, don't. Find someone else who's created content that's really valuable, that your audience would find value in, and be able to share that yourself. So instead of creating it, you can find it, share it, compile it, and provide that to your audience as well. So this is particularly effective with content like email newsletters or e-magazines, where the natural tendency is to link to or have lots of different pieces of content in there. Some organizations find it difficult to do email newsletters because they don't create enough content. But I'm often recommending that organizations, smaller ones that don't have a lot of content, could create one original piece, or 2 original pieces, and then put in 4 or 5 other curated pieces as well. And these could be articles, they could be images, they could be quotes. Always, you want to make sure you're giving credit, showing appreciation for what actually did create it. But just as an example, this Instagram account has 1.9 million followers, and all it does is curate content. It curates photos. And actually, if you look at this one, so this photo was from Samantha Hal Reed, or no, Samantha L. Reed. And the text in the post is even curated. It's a quote from Art Wolf. So the photo is curated and the text is curated. And that's what this account does. They have a 1.9 million followers. So curation is an incredibly viable strategy that can be used. So find an image, article, or story from an organization you're closely associated with and ask if you can share it with credit, with a link. If it's a link to an article and you want to put it in your newsletter, you probably don't have to ask because you're linking to the direct piece. But if you want to use someone's image or something like that on your social media, you'll definitely want to ask for permission. And then this one, be curious and ask questions. We're probably almost done here, but we're almost there. We got 2 more. So be curious and ask questions. Instead of actually creating the content, why don't you ask your audience to create the content for you? So all you have to do with this type of content is actually just come up with the questions. And this can be a really great way to connect with people and get them engaged. And you don't even have to have the expertise or the content or the perspective. And you can do this on so many different platforms, in stories, in posts, in polls, surveys, images, emails. There's a lot of different ways you can ask questions, and it gets engagement, it gets people thinking, and you understand their perspective. Now, if you've got answers from them, now you have content. You can use all of those answers as content. You can compile them, put them into an article, you can share it on social media. So why don't you go ahead and just list off 5 or 6 so questions you could ask your audience on social media or through a poll or direct email to try and elicit that engagement without having to really create any content other than a question. Here's an example of tourism awareness for Tofino, Tofino tourism awareness. They do this a lot. They actually share what they're thinking or doing through Instagram stories and ask a question. So in this post, they've taken their Instagram story. They were asking about over-tourism in Tofino. And 96% of people said yes, and 4% of people said no, there isn't over-tourism. They took that story, screenshotted it, and now turned it into a post talking about the results of that question. And then in the next frame, they even took a screenshot of the stats of that question. So you can see that not only is it 90, whatever it was, 6%, but 139 people voted for yes and 6 for no, because it could have been 3 for yes and 1 for no. But in this case, they're showing those numbers, and they're showing that kind of behind the scenes to what they've been asking and talking about. And then method number 10, we're here at the end, reshare and republish. You'd be surprised, but if you think about it, most of your new followers, your new subscribers, if they're email subscribers, they're not going to go back and look at every piece of content that you've done. Not the emails, back at your social media posts. They might scroll a little bit, but they're not going to go way back. And all of that content can be used, or actually reshared again, to people that are newly subscribed. So go back and look at your content to see what's timeless. Some content you can't reshare because it was for a particular time, it was an event or something like that. But there might be timeless content that you've created, educational, data-driven, quote-driven, opinion-based, that is easily reshared. There's no need to really look beyond just sharing it with your new subscribers. And then there's republishing. Republishing is slightly different because you actually need to update the content slightly. So maybe you wrote an article a few years ago, but now there's new data, or there's new insights, or there's new updates into your industry or technology. So what you can do is actually take that old article and reformat it and change the things that need to be edited for it to be new, valuable content that's relevant again. And then you can reshare it, republish it on your website, update the dates, and all of that. So you're essentially taking what you had before and just making it more relevant to what it is today. So your task here is to go through each of your channels for the past few years and note every piece that is timeless and could be shared or could be updated and republished. And then a little bonus here for new email subscribers or new donors that come onto your email list. I would recommend, if you can do it, create a series of emails, or even just one, start with one, your welcome email, and point them to your best content, your best timeless content that you've created. Maybe it's a big collection of photos from something, or maybe it's some educational piece that gives them a ton of value. Or several pieces. If you could do a couple of emails over that first couple of weeks when someone's a new donor or new subscriber, keeps them engaged. It looks like you're creating a ton more content, and it's showing them your best stuff right from the beginning, stuff that they probably wouldn't have seen otherwise. So there's another nice little tip to create more content, or at least show that you're creating a lot of content to your new subscribers. And then just remember that people want you to make more great content. Seriously, it's not just me. I don't want you to make well, I do want you to make more content, but people want to see your content. They're getting tired of COVID, forest fires, scandals, they need to see things that are valuable in driving the conversations forward, in creating the impact the organization is on the journey to create. So please go out and make more content. The more content you make, the more you can learn from it, the more you can get feedback on it, and the more your organization can have an impact with a bigger audience. So just a little note back to Elevate, what I was talking about earlier. I'm on a kind of a mission to elevate the impact industry in BC with this platform. So one of the projects that I'm working on right now is to build a directory of social enterprises and nonprofits. It's going to be connected with the events and the jobs and the platform in that way, but I want to create a comprehensive directory that can be filtered by different industries, by SDGs, by cities, and really bring a lot of the impact activity and organizations to the forefront of where people can find it easily. So if you would willing to help me out, it would be really awesome. Go to elevatehub.ca/submit and you can add your organization through a form there. And then when the technology is updated, which should be fairly soon, your organization will be already listed in that directory. So yeah, that would be awesome. And if you want to connect with me, again, there's my email, my Twitter, and yeah, really appreciate it. Thank you so much. If anyone has any questions, feel free.
Rock on. Thank you so much, Joel. Really appreciate that. And there were some like kind of super killer tips in there. You know, now, so here's as everyone is sort of preparing to put their other question into the chat, here's one that I'm pulling from some of the other initial comments.
Mm-hmm.
So people are like, okay, I now have a whole bucket load of amazing, powerful content. But now they're like, how do I create some rhythm for myself so I actually start getting it out there and scheduling it?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any suggestions around things like content calendars or scheduling tools?
Yeah, lots of, I've used so many different kinds, and the easiest place to start with a content calendar is a spreadsheet. Everyone has access to it. Everyone knows how to use a spreadsheet. I don't like putting it in actual calendars like a Google Calendar. I find that content in there, it just ends up cluttering up your physical meetings and events and things like that. And then people stop looking at the content. So I like to keep the dedicated content calendar. The first version would be an email or a spreadsheet. The second version would be a task manager, something like Asana or a to-do kind of program, Trello. I'm a big fan of Asana. I think that they're a very robust task manager that can be used for content calendars pretty easily. But if you're scared of task managers, a spreadsheet is fantastic. In terms of actually organizing your content so that you can distribute it, one of the tactics that I like to use is to basically theme days of the week. Now, some people do this where it's actually themed content and they have Marketing Mondays or something like that, where it's like a consistent type of content every day or a particular day of the week. And that's one way to do it. But sometimes that consistency from your audience perspective can be hard to keep up. But consistency in terms of what content do you produce? So for example, some organizations were curating content for LinkedIn every Thursday. So we have a list of all of our links of articles that we want to curate. And then every Thursday, we post our curated article on Thursday. Now, it's not so consistent that somebody's going to notice it from an audience perspective, but it's consistent enough that from a team perspective, you know, Thursday curated content, I'm going to take 5 minutes and go post that link. So that's one tip that I would really highly recommend, is theming your activity around content.
Awesome. That's super helpful. So I had another question here from some people who are saying, like, we are kind of trapped in this COVID moment. Some people, you know, we're doing like in-person events with youth. Obviously, they don't have that kind of access now. So some of their ability to capture the content as they used to do it has changed. Thinking on the some of the ideas you talked about so far, what would you maybe recommend to a group like this, which was used to do in-person events with youth?
Sure. My first recommendation would be to go back and look at our topic. I don't remember which number it was, but on basically resharing and reworking your old content. So any of the methods where you're looking back at previous content that you've done and finding new ways to format, finding new angles to produce something on, those can all be really helpful when you're limited in what you can capture or what you can physically do because you're stuck behind your computer at home. So that would be one of the first places to look. The other kind of angle that you could look at it is in terms of getting participation from other people to create the content. So you might not be the one taking the photo now because you're stuck behind your computer. You're not physically where the rest of your team is. So eliciting your other team members' help or the whoever's involved in that program or that activity, getting their help to create content and being very open about becoming a content organization and wanting to document and share what you're working on really involves getting other people's help. And so conversations with your leadership team, conversations with your other departments, your fundraising teams, around, okay, what are you doing on a daily basis? What are you doing on an activity level? And how could some of that potentially be captured and then shared through our content activities?
Awesome. Thank you so much. At this point, I need to make an end. We've gone through our hour. I'm really grateful for everyone who gave us some time. But even go for it.
Sure.
Just one last question.
Yeah, sure. So I'm coming from the commercial world where, there's always a call to action. With it, whatever, click, even if it's just click on this link, view this catalog, subscribe. I'm not a fan of that anyway, but even also when applied to, nonprofit, sign our petition, vote and stuff, just sort of, mindless slacktivism just for the sake of engagement. No, but I mean, some people say you should, some people say you must, some people say you can't afford not to. Some people are just, pimping it for clicks all the time. Me personally, I find it very aggravating reading that sort of content. But if you don't, then it's hard to measure the engagement. Did they read to the bottom of the article? Did they like the article? Did they forward it? How do you strike a balance? And do you have, what sort of analytics do you have to see?
Yeah, that is a tough piece. I think when you're talking about some engagement rates, if it's click from a social media post onto an article or click from here or play the video, there are analytics there and you do get some of that engagement piece. In terms of actually converting it into subscribers or donors, those numbers where the drop off and disconnect is, it can be a pretty fuzzy gray area. You're absolutely right. But I think to your point, you don't want to not have the opportunity for someone to connect deeper with you, if that makes sense. So while not every piece of content, if you're reading an article and 3 times within the article, you're saying, hey, subscribe to our newsletter, hey, donate to this, hey, do this, that's going to wear people out really quickly. But having the opportunity for them to connect deeper at almost any point is pretty essential in my opinion. So whether it's, if they're on your website, if it is at the bottom of the blog post where you have some kind of standard call to action that's always there, or is it on the sidebar, or is it on social media every so often you're asking people to sign up to your email list or something like that. I'm not a big fan of asking for donations directly on social media, but if you can get people to sign up to receive more value, receive videos, articles, emails, something that will help them to have more impact with you, then that kind of transaction and click call to action can be really valuable. I don't know if I answered your question quite right, but yeah.
No, I think you did. And also, so I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area, so I think there's a general add on top of COVID. There's a how shall we say, a complete burnout with the darker side of social media. And,
Yeah.
November the 4th is going to be a new beginning.
Oh,
No, I mean, people will come back on Facebook, potentially.
Yeah, it's definitely a weird time, and there's just so many people that I'm finding, it's getting more cluttered online because everyone's
Well, that's one word.
where half of things used to be offline, but half, not really, but so many activities happened offline, and now virtually everything is online. So the volume of everything has gotten up so much. We're even taking out the entire pandemic, Black Lives Matter controversies, politics, all of that, taking all of that out, just the volume of people that have shifted to virtual and creating content has gone up. So yeah,
but I think the overload is the burnout and the overload and the cynicism is also very, very palpable.
Yeah, absolutely.
I hear it. Yeah, so that sounds good. I again want to thank everyone for staying with us this evening. Joel, you're basically a national treasure. Super, super grateful for this. Thank you so much. And we are going to put you to work in the future. But for those who want to go and dig more deeply into this, or say what did he say about 32 minutes into this? We'll have the video available, and we'll send the link to everyone who joined us today in the next little while. So that's coming soon. Otherwise, thank you so much. You're the best, friends.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And yes, to Nikki, the chat log will also be available on the blog.
I want to know how much he paid the squirrel for taking the photo of the tree looking down.
A non-profit rate.
Hey, was that squirrel unionized or not? Take it.
Awesome. Take care.
All right, see y'all. I'm going to do the old shutdown.